Competition isn't killing your product. Price isn't killing your product. Selling to a buyer instead of a system is what's killing your product. So your marketing, your sales, your pitch, your go-to-market, they all target specific personas. And you've done your homework, you've studied these personas, you've understood their challenges and their needs. You've got all this information about them, and that's great, but it isn't enough. And this is a very common blind spot. I do see it a lot. It's the simple fact that you're not really selling to a buyer, you're selling to a system. And if you're not targeting a system with your go-to-market, with your pitch, your product is going to continue to face stalled sales and conversations that dry up overnight. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how you apply systems thinking to drive adoption and get your business from awkward conversations that don't really go anywhere to close after close after close. My name's Lashana. I'm a product marketer who helps businesses, marketers, builders, founders understand how to go to market and grow. So let's talk about systems thinking. It honestly might be the most underrated tool that can be used to map out B2B decision makers. And oftentimes builders, founders, or marketers just aren't really aware of how it can be applied, especially when it comes to figuring out how to map out your go-to-market and understand the buyer's suite. So it goes beyond, who are the buyers in the room, who comes to the table when a decision needs to be made, and it actually starts to pan more towards what are the dynamics in that room. Because it's one thing to know who's at the table, but you need to know who's driving certain things. Where does the influence come from? Why does this person influence this decision? Who has trust? Who doesn't have trust? And all these things really start to play into this bigger conversation around what is the system, the underlying system that is propelling deals forward and holding other deals back. Systems thinking ranks among the fastest growing skills through 2030. It's up alongside AI, big data, and programming. It reflects employees' recognition that understanding of how different parts of a system interact is vital in today's complex socioeconomic landscape. So the first thing you need to do is see the system, not the silo. Most marketers and founders are going to zoom in on specific roles. You're going to think this is the economic buyer, this is the decision maker, this is a user, this is an influencer, this is procurement. But that's just a list. It's not a map. Systems thinking forces you to flip the lens. Influence is an edge. Trust is a force, and delay is a signal. So what does that all mean? When we think about the stakeholders, we call them nodes. This essentially means every person involved in the buying decision is a distinct point in the system, and they all have their own goals, constraints, influence, and their own perspective on the value versus risk ratio of opt-in for whatever it is you're trying to sell to them. This matters because when you map them as nodes, it forces you to see everyone who touches the decision, not just the buyer. It also helps you to avoid blind spots like the silent influencer or the passive resistor. The next thing you want to look at is influence and how it is an edge. This is basically the idea that influence is a connection between nodes. It defines how one stakeholder affects another's thinking, decisions, or behavior. Influence can flow up, as in a user influencing their manager. It can flow down, as in a C-level giving a direction, and it can flow sideways, cross-departmental alliances. Next, remember that trust is a force. Trust is the gravity of your system. It pulls people together or pushes them apart. It's not visible like a job title, but it determines receptiveness, buy-in, and advocacy. So trust can exist between stakeholders and your company, and between stakeholders and your competitors. So this is really important because you just can't assume authority means alignment. You have to build or borrow trust. And you can do that through getting a champion who's going to become your internal advocate and equipping them with the tools they need to go and promote and market your solution to their peers and their senior leaders. Trust is going to accelerate decision making and it's going to overcome objections. So think about the types of marketing you can employ to really help build out that trust. And this is where everybody's favorite marketing strategy / approach, account-based marketing, becomes so valuable, because you can go into such high levels of detail focusing on that specific account that you end up turning people who are kind of maybe a little bit uncertain into advocates, because they feel like you see and understand their challenges, you understand their business, what their goals are, what they're working towards, and you kind of end up becoming a no-brainer because they look at your account-based, persona-focused content that acknowledges these relationships between their different nodes and between those different stakeholders, and addresses that in a way that feels personal and feels effective. The final element of this map and this system is to recognize how delay is just a signal. So in systems thinking, delay isn't just about the time lag, it's actually diagnostic. It signals that there's an unresolved risk or doubt, that there's friction in the stakeholder network, that there's a lack of alignment or buy-in. And this matters because you can't just follow up, you need to investigate the delays like a systems issue. Is procurement dragging because of legal blockers? Is IT disengaged due to a misalignment? Is the decision maker waiting on internal feedback or validation? So for example, you see that there's a delay in a contract review. This could be about a power struggle between procurement and the business unit. So you may need to realign your stakeholders, your champion, and bring them together. You may need to provide some sort of fact sheet or how-to or FAQs document, or even a use case or a case study from a customer who's a similar business and how they may have done things, just to show them that you have their support so that your champion remains energized because they don't feel like they're kind of doing things themselves or alone, but that you have deep understanding of those dynamics. And if you're competent in that way, surely the product is good. So the real power of systems thinking and doing this approach is that you can start to look for your leverage points. So when you're even having early stage conversations, you can start digging into the details and figuring out where those points are, and this is where you're going to change the game. In every system, there are a few high leverage nodes, a respective engineer who vouches for you, or a user who shares data internally. Or maybe it's a decision maker who just needs to see zero onboarding risk. Find the leverage and take small actions that shift that whole dynamic. And you need to track this over time. It's not a one and done thing, especially if you have a longer sales cycle. Things can change. Maybe your champion deprioritizes the deal and they kind of cool off a little bit. Who else can you go to build that advocacy with? Make sure you're having conversations with different people. Every point of contact, every conversation with every stakeholder is an opportunity to build out this map and gain more insight. So it should evolve and grow and change over time, especially as you get closer to that deal. And everybody should be feeding into this. Your marketing attribution tech stack should be sharing what persona, what stakeholder opened what email, landed on what landing page, how long they stayed there. Get really granular about your data, and sales should be mapping these conversations, capturing them in whatever tool you use, and building out this map. I spoke to this stakeholder and they said this, and they changed their mind from this to this from the last time I spoke to them. And they mentioned this other stakeholder, this node, who has fed into this, and you can see how this picture starts to evolve and change. So keep updating your map and keep adapting your moves. Founders and early stage teams, builders, marketers, salespeople, they can sometimes think of, this sales process as persuasion, but it's not about persuasion. It's really much more about deep education and authentic relationship building. And you can't do either of those without a thorough understanding, not just of the individual buyers and the personas involved, but their relationships with each other. You're essentially trying to infiltrate a group of people who work together every day, who know each other really well in theory, and figure out how to ingratiate yourself in that space. So it's not about gaming people, it's about guiding prospects through multiple educational touch points while broadening and deepening your relationships with them. So if you've been noticing a bit of an invisible drag in, mid to late stages of your sales cycle, if you're kind of finding that your champions go quiet and they're not signing, and you start wondering if it's a competitor or it's price or it's something about your product, 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to be something about your approach, and there's some information that you just don't have that could be the game changer. And we know, and we've seen in the market a million times, the best product doesn't always win, the best teams do. So figure out what you don't know, use systems thinking to build out a deeper view of how your buying suite is operating, who the players are and what the dynamics are, and use that to your advantage. Thanks so much for watching. If this was helpful, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time.